Good evening, my name is Alejandro Cantor, and tonight I will be explaining the differences between the legalization and decriminalization of drugs such as marijuana, cocaine, heroin, etc. Now, in this age of divisive politics, the media and the figureheads of each respective movement tries to use words that are ambiguous or confusing in order to sort of misguide or to sway their audiences to their bias. Now, this happens with every kind of contemporary moral issues such as abortion, gun rights, even euthanasia. For example, with the abortion debates, debaters don't usually explain the differences between different types of abortions, and this leads to an audience quite honestly not being informed about which type of abortion they feel should be illegal or not legal. Now, the same thing happens with this decriminalization versus legalization debate, where these two terms are just not explained correctly. And of course, the purpose of this speech tonight is to inform the differences between legalization and decriminalization. Because one of them, decriminalization, changes the punishment for possessing a drug, a scheduled drug, while legalization encourages the taxation, the regulation, and the production of drugs. And before we jump in, I'd like to show a visual aid that might help. See, with this man in decriminalization, we show him stepping out of a jail because the laws have changed and now he does not get punished for having possession. On this other side, we see a man openly enjoying what seems to be marijuana. He most likely got it from a dispenser, such as the ones that you find in Colorado or Washington. And let's jump in. Now, according to The Guardian, when drugs are legalized, they are taxed and regulated by government entities and sometimes even private entities when the state permits it. Now, the reason that this is done, the legalization of drugs, is because homemade drugs such as heroin can become dangerous, especially if they contain impurities or other dangerous combinations of chemicals. And legalization aims to dismantle completely the black market. That is a big contrast to decriminalization, which just aims to not punish the individual as harshly for possessing small amounts of certain drugs. For example, according to thoughtco.com, users who get caught with small amounts of, for example, marijuana, usually have to pay small amounts of fines or have rehabilitation processes instead of going to jail. And this is a big contrast to legalization, because even though drugs have been sort of the offense for drugs have been normalized, there still exists a black market, a thriving black market under decriminalization. Now, with legalization, this is mostly dismantled because the consumer will now turn to the government instead of shady drug dealers, which essentially just dries up the supply. Now, with these two differences between legalization, between legalization and decriminalization, we can see also another effect in our society. For example, with decriminalization, the black market still exists, and therefore there is still some of that gang violence and drug trafficking violence that we see across the border, and not just across the border, but across state lines and low-income neighborhoods. With legalization, it is projected that the number of drug users will remain the same, but the crime will actually decrease. Violent crime will decrease. And in conclusion, the media tends to get these two terms confused. They are not the same, as we have seen today. One, legalization, the effects of this action, of this political and judicial process, mostly aims to dismantle a black market, reduce crime, and to tax and regulate the production of drugs. While decriminalization just aims to not punish users as much. They will just be slapped on the wrist with rehab time or a fine. And now that we know more about these two terms, we know now the two distinctions, you can now make a informed decision at the polls at either national or state voting processes, such as propositions. My name is Alejandro Cantor. It's been a pleasure. Good night.